Hi everyone. So far, you have gone through most of the lessons relating to sketch skills. So you should be familiar with what are the parameters needed, what are the things to include within your annotated sketch. Now imagine in this context, as shared earlier, that you're walking past this squatter settlement and you are curious, how is it different from a formal housing? So that is the thing to first look out for. What is the intent of your sketch? Because that will determine what details that you like to include and what are the annotations that you like to record as well. So for the purpose of this activity, if you take a look at this photo, it would have already been pre-divided into 9 sections, the 9 grid line. In reality, of course, when you look out into the surrounding, into the environment, you may not have the 9 grid line unless you use it like a lens where you can look through. If otherwise, you can always print out the photograph, draw the 9 grid line. Right? The purpose behind the 9 grid line is so there is some degree of accuracy between what you see and what you're drawing, right? So in this context, I'm given a blank template for me to draw on, a blank space. Yeah, so I would draw out my 9 grid line. In reality, of course, I would expect you to do so using ruler, but because of the devices that I'm using, I'm just going to draw them freehand for now. Okay, so we're dividing it into the foreground, middle ground, and background. And then we're also going to be dividing it into your left, right, and your center. So these are the portions of the uh, landscape that you're going to be recording. So what is it that you're actually going to be drawing? So let's take a look. In this photograph, there is a fair amount of details. And remember, when it comes to our geographical sketch, our field sketch, it doesn't have to be an artistic endeavor. So I'm not looking out for shading, nor am I looking out for you to record every single detail inside there. Of course, the big picture things has to be included, right? For example, certain things such as the fact that there's a train track. So if you see here, this train track is actually only located at the foreground, in the middle, and to the right side. So that is what I'm going to use as my frame of reference. Yes, so this will be my train tracks. Now, of course, when you look at my sketch, you may think, oh, this is a train track, but it doesn't necessarily have to depict the reality because I'm not counting how many piles there are, how many different pieces of wood, and what have you. So it's just a general sketch of that. Of course, and you're looking at this sketch for the first time, someone may not be able to interpret what you're drawing, right? Even yourself, later on, when you refer back to your old data that you've collected, you may look at this and think, is this a train track or is this like a ladder that has fallen down? Right? So the important thing to first include would be a label. So this is a train track. Of course, you may always utilize this later on or modify it when you're annotating, but at least some details are already captured. And to prevent possible confusion, at least you have also included some details. Yeah, some labels. Next, of course, the very important thing, because we're talking about how it differs from formal housing, we'll be looking at the housing itself. So in this case, the housing is spread all through the middle ground closer to you on the foreground, especially on the left side and the middle side. So let's draw that in as well. Okay, so this is my buildings. So it's broken up into different sections. So there are mini sub buildings that are around there. Sure. So let me include them as well. And once again, if you take a look here, I'm not drawing every single detail because does it matter that there are like one, two, three, four, how many pieces of material side by side? No, right? What matters is that I'm at least able to identify that this is informal housing, right? The windows that I'm also going to be drawing, I'd like you to not think of it, oh, I need to obsess over how many windows there are as far as possible, or like whether they have blinds or no blinds. It depends on what is the purpose of your sketch. Are you trying to highlight one thing or another? For example, for myself, in my sketch, because I want to see how it differs from formal housing, my sketch will have the fact that it is made of multiple colors because there are multiple materials. So instead of just talking about the vertical sections that I'm drawing, I also like to include horizontal sections so that I can highlight, ooh, there are actually different color materials. I'll include the fact that there's something made out of cloth, that there's something made out of cloth here as well. Yeah. So these are some of the things I will include. I'll also include the fact that this is a high-rise enterprise, right? It is, I think, 3 to 4 stories high, including the fact that they're using ladders to be able to access the higher floors. Right? So if these are some details that I like to emphasize, these will be the details that I will also include as well in my sketch. Okay. Oh, I forgot to also include that there is the fourth floor in some of the parts, not all of the parts. Why this matters is that means that this is unplanned, right? Some parts they choose to have, some parts they choose not to have. Okay, let's move on from here. So you've already drawn the buildings. What then do you think is worth including? Perhaps certain things such as their facilities and amenities. I can see here forms of waste management, or rather like rubbish bin, right? So there are receptacles here as well. And once again, as an outsider looking at this, or even yourself looking at this later on, you may not be able to tell what they are. It looks like, I don't know, a minion character maybe. So it's worth also labeling. Right? So there are certain things that I like to also include. So these are things so that for future references, I won't get confused. These are what they're supposed to be. Yeah. Last one, there are people within this area. Of course, this is a residential space. I would like to include the people here as well. And please keep in mind, let's take a look at the sample that I'm drawing. Why am I choosing these few people to be featured in my sketch? Because this is something that differs from a HDB estate, right? You don't expect to see, for one, a nearby train track, nor would I expect to see people on the train track. So this is something that is unique to this context, is worth recording. There are also some people moving around in the background, some people moving around in the foreground. You can see the degree of detail that I'm drawing in the people, right? It is not like I have to draw what color clothes they're wearing, right? Perhaps it's relevant, but at least at this scale, I can't really see. So these are just the degree of things I'm willing to include in sketch. I'm sorry, I dropped something there. All right. Let's move on then. So I've already labeled my buildings. Oh, maybe not finished. Maybe I should label further the fact that these are buildings, just in case I get confused in the future. Then we go into the next set of skill, which is to annotate. Because remember, the purpose of my sketch is to show how it differs from formal housing. For instance, the fact that there's a train track here and the housing is so close to the train track, in spite of the potential noise that will be there, that is something that differs. So I would like to record this down, right? For example, train track being, and if you see here, this example, I'm using my label as part of my annotation. So train track being located near the residential space. More likely, it is a residential space located near the train track, because if you remember what we've learned, this is an unwanted land, so that's why they choose to stay there. But nevertheless, it is still the same meaning, it's just located near. So residential space, in spite of the potential noise pollution. So this is definitely something that differs from our HDB estate. While we do have certain things like LRT lines that may intersect some residential spaces, at the very least, it's not like those heavy duty, big scale, legit train tracks, the chaka chaka choo choo, that kind. So it's definitely not the same. Next one, the thing that I mentioned earlier, what I would like to highlight, how is it different from the HDB estate, is the materials that it is made up of, right? Made of different, to show that there is a larger variety of materials, types of scavenged materials. Unlike using proper ones such as concrete. Yeah. Now, the unfortunate thing in this annotation is that because of the limited space that I have, my annotation is overlapping into my sketch. So I would suggest when you are doing your sketches, make sure there's sufficient space outside of your 9 grid 9 so that you can draw and write without it overlapping and making it so untidy. It's very hard for us to take a look and see what is it that you're trying to draw and write. Okay. Last part, I also like to highlight that even though there is a similarity here, that HDB estates are tall, it can go multiple stories, same thing here, but you can tell that the materials being the way that it is, the structure being the way that it is, it feels a lot more flimsy, viable for collapse. So that's something that I like to include. High rise, or perhaps this is not a correct term to use because high is subjective, so I'll be clearer. 4-story high sections, likely due to high population density, but, pardon my handwriting again, but it means more like to be vulnerable to collapse. Yeah. So if you have to take a look between my three annotations that I've already included, of course, it's not exhaustive. You may find a lot more things that you want to include. By all means, please do. Right? Out of at least these three annotations, I've already highlighted some differences between formal housing, like HDB estates, compared to this squatter settlement that can be found in this photograph. Now, one thing I'd like you to try and do in your own activity, perhaps as a pair, can take a look at this. There's a reason why I specifically highlighted this rubbish bin. Because this residential estate, their waste management approaches uses these kind of receptacles. So how would you elaborate to highlight in your own annotation? For example, if you drew the sketch, what do you think you would include in your annotation to showcase how is it different from your HDB estate? Okay, so hopefully this is a good practice for you. There'll be a one more later on for you to work on so that you can get more prepared and ready with building up your field sketch skills. All the best.